Hi guys, I'm Anita and I'm back with another video. Today is time for my July wrap-up. July has been my slowest reading month of the year so far, but I still managed to read quite a few books, so it's not all bad. Let's go over the statistics first and then get into the books and what I actually rated them. As usual, I'll try and put timestamps in the description box below so you can jump ahead to something if you prefer just going straight to the reviews and watch it from there, or a specific review you'd like to see. In July, I ended up reading 13 books. The total amount of pages is 4,179, with an average of 321 pages per book. So yeah, as I said, it's been my slowest reading month. Usually I'm about 15 to 16. That's have been the sort of norm this year, but I also haven't read very many audios this month, which you'll see when I get over my statistics. In terms of genres, I read 1 science fiction book, 5 fantasy books, 3 contemporaries, 1 urban fantasy, 1 paranormal romance, 1 magical realism, and 1 mystery book. In terms of formatting, I read 1 book that was a hardcover, 5 that were trade paperbacks, 2 that were ebooks, and 5 that were audios. And in terms of length, 12 of them were regular novels and 1 of them was a novella. And in terms of age group, I read 9 books that were adult books. I read 2 YA books. I read 1 middle grade and 1 kids book. In terms of publication years, I read 2 that were published in the 70s, 4 that were published in the 2000s. I read 1 book that was published in 2012, 1 that was published in 2013, 1 was published in 2 that were published in 2017, 2 that were published in 2018, and finally I read 1 book that was published in 2019. In terms of page length, I read 4 books that was between 100 and 199 pages. I read 1 book between 200 and 299 pages. I read 5 books between 300 and 399 pages. I read 2 books between 400 and 499 pages. And then finally I read 1 book that was between 500 and 599 pages. The shortest book that I read this month was Rook Protocol by Martha Wells. This is 158 pages. The longest book that I read in July was Amarah by L.L. McNeill. This is 570 pages long. In terms of series and standalone books, I read 11 books that were part of a series and only 2 books that were standalones. And of those 11 series books, I read 4 books that were a new started series, and 7 of them were ongoing books in the series. I didn't complete or catch up to any, and I didn't DNF any series either. In terms of my rating, I read 1 book that was 2 star, 2 books that were 2.5 stars, 3 books that were 3.5 stars, 6 books that were 4 stars, and 1 book that was 4.5 stars. So I didn't have any 5-star reads this month, which is the first of the year so far, I guess. I don't think any other months of the year I have had at least 1 5-star book, so that was a bit weird. But now that was all of that about the statistics. Now let's get into the books and what I read in July. The first book that I finished in July was Murder on Marble Road by Victoria Thompson. This is the 6th book, I believe, in the Gaslight Mystery series, and this series follows widower Sarah Brandt and Detective Sergeant Frank Malloy. Sarah Brandt is also a midwife, working as midwife, and so yeah. In this one, she becomes part of the investigation because her father's friend was murdered. And Sarah Brandt is estranged from her family after she married a doctor instead of, which is seen to marry below her standards. She was basically shunned a little bit, but then when he passed away, they expected her to come back and she would have been accepted back in the family. But she decides instead that she wants to keep a profession as a midwife, and so she's still not really part of the family, and they look a little bit down on that. In this one, Sarah tries to seek out to her parents because the one who is the murder victim is her father's friend, so she's a little worried that something will happen to him as well. And so that's how it gets mixed up in the investigation. I keep really enjoying these books, and they are a lot of fun. I enjoy how the friendship relationship thing between Sarah and Frank keeps developing. I mean, they do have feelings for each other, but there are some complications if they were ever going to get together, and they have some prejudices against each other. So I don't know where this is ever going to go, but I do enjoy it, and it's I give it 4 out of 5 stars. I tend to give all of them 4 out of 5 stars because they sort of, I just know what to expect at this point, and they never really disappoint. So I'm excited to see if at one point I will actually give one of them 5 stars, because I mean, they could do that if it really surprises me, so we'll see. The next thing that I finished in July was Ottoline Goes to School by Chris Riddell. This is book 2 in the Ottoline series. In Danish it's called Ottoline Går på Kostskole, which is the Danish term for boarding school. We actually have 2 types of names for boarding school, but Kostskole is the posh edition of a boarding school, and we also have another word where it's more like a boarding school, but it's not for posh, it's for the general middle class person. Anyway, yeah. Anyway, long story short, Ottoline is more or less spending the majority of the time without her parents. The parents are traveling across the world trying to discover new items that they will take home. So she spends a lot of time with Mr. Markvart, who is a little creature that was found in Norway by her parents, and they took him home with them, and they became best friends instantly. And in this one, Ottoline convinces her parents that she needs to start going to school because of a girl that she befriends is going to this school, and she becomes really fascinated with it, because when you go to the school you can find out what your knack is, what your affinity is, and she doesn't know that, so she wants to find out. And so yeah, it's a lot of fun. These stories have images all the way through, but they're super easy reads, as you can tell. The writing and the text is really large, but I do really enjoy kids books. They have always have pretty good messages, and it's nice to have something easy to read sometimes when you're reading. And so this one is definitely highly recommended. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next thing that finished was Wicca King by Ancrum. I read this while I was traveling to London because I could read a lot of it on the plane, and then I read something in the evenings, but I never read very much when I'm traveling, at least not like big city traveling, because we are walking a lot around. And so when you get back, you're really exhausted and not really in a place where I can read a lot. So the majority of the reading of this book was done while traveling. But I will say I understand partly why some really enjoy this one. It has good representation, and it deals with mental health in a really interesting way. However, I was never into the story. I was reading it as though I was looking, like, on the outside looking in, not really part of the story. And I don't know what it was, if it was the writing or why I didn't feel connected to the story and I was not immersed in the story, but I felt like I was never really into it. So for that reason, I give it 2.5 stars, but I'm pretty sure that some people will really enjoy it. The next thing that I finished was The Rook by Daniel O'Malley. This I've been working on for quite a while, so I actually only had 120 pages or something left to read in July of this book. But I had put it down for a month or a month and a half or something like that, and so I'd a little bit forgotten what it had gotten to in terms of this plot. So I think it was a bad thing for me to actually put it down for such a long time, because I was not fully immersed in the last part of it. I did enjoy some of it. It was a really interesting magic system. It is an urban fantasy set in London or in England. It follows these rooks. Like, our main character is a rook. Rook Thomas is her name. She is able to, if she touches someone else's skin with skin-to-skin contact, they will pretty much feel like they were electrocuted or something like that. So she always, when she touches someone else, wears gloves, so as not to like put damage on someone else. She finds out when we begin this one, we're receiving a letter and we're told that the main character doesn't remember who she is, but this person, her other self from before, has been notified that she might lose her memory at one point. So she started writing down letters to herself when she loses her memory, so as to try and save grace a little bit, so that people don't find out that she has amnesia. So she tries to, as much as she can, to pretend that she is Rook Thomas, and she has never lost her memory. So she has all of these. She's tried in the beginning. She's scrambling a little bit because she doesn't know a lot, and it's like her memory loss goes from 1 second to another, more or less. So yeah, I enjoyed that part of it. I think I always find amnesia topics interesting and how to deal with it, but sometimes it was a little boring reading about what happened previously. I don't know. There were definitely times when something interesting happened. We were sort of thrown out of it when we had to look back into what happened before. I know that it all came together in a way, but by the end of it, I'm not sure exactly what the point of this book was. So I gave it 3.5 stars. And I'll try and see if I can get hold of the second book. I think it's only a duology, so it shouldn't be that bad, and see if I can't find it on sale sometime and finish it that way. But I did enjoy it. It was just not my favorite thing, and I probably shouldn't have put it down for such a long time. So 3.5 stars for this book. I'm not sure if I would have put 4 stars down if I'd finished it immediately, but by the end I just felt as if I wasn't sure what the point of this book exactly was. The next thing that I finished was The Readers of Broken Wheel recommends. The Danish title is called Læserne i Broken Wheel anbefaler. And this is basically a book about this girl. Is she called Sarah? I am bad at remembering names. Yes, Sarah. She is writing letters to this elderly lady called Amy, who lives in Iowa, the US. Sarah is living in Sweden. And the author who wrote this is also Swedish. And they've been writing letters to each other about books because they found out they both have a big fondness for books. And so Amy convinces Sarah that she has to visit her when Sarah is let go at work. She's sort of in a bad place, not knowing what to do. And so Amy actually asks her to visit her in Iowa, and she decides to go. But when she gets there, Amy has passed away, and she doesn't really know what to do about that. So she gets to this small town, and the people there convinces her to stay for at least the remainder of the time that she was supposed to stay, because Amy would have wanted her to do that. And so she lives in Amy's house after she's passed away, and a little weirded about it all. But after a while, when people keeps paying, not letting her pay for things around the town, like food and the grocery store and stuff like that, she decides she needs a way to pay back to the town. So she decides to start a bookshop that was in Amy's name. No, the shop was in Amy's name because it was her husband's shop that she never really found out how to do. And so she decides all of the books that Amy has in storage, she wants to give them away or sell them to people to give something back to the town so they can start becoming readers. And it was just a really fun story. I enjoyed all of the reading messages there was in this one. There were references to different books, both classics and not so much classics, but just in general, and books that I have read and enjoyed. And so it was fun to see those comments in the book. And also just a comment about being a reader and loving books, and it all just made for a really fun story. And it also featured a little bit of a romance between her and one of the citizens. But I enjoyed it a lot by the end of it, and the audio was really fun. I mean, I listened to a Danish audio of this, so I don't know how it would have been if it had been an English narrator, but I'm pretty sure it would have been fine as well. I ended up giving this 4 out of 5 stars because I definitely really enjoyed myself when I read it, and will highly recommend it if you come upon it. And if you enjoy women's fiction or chick lit, you'd probably enjoy this one as well. It's not super romance heavy, so it's more focused on Amy and her reading and how she's going to maybe possibly stay after this happens, because she doesn't really have a life back in Sweden. She wants to go back to, so she doesn't really know how to be able to stay there because she doesn't have a working visa. And yeah, it's really interesting, and I enjoyed it and gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next thing that I finished was The Hand of Oberon by Roger Zelazny. This is book 4 in the Amber Chronicles. This book I struggled with so bad. It took me over a month to read this, and it's only like 184 pages long. And it says a little something about how little I was enjoying it at the time of reading it. I think it was because it was very repetitive if compared to the other books. There was not a lot of new revelations in the story compared to the previous books. And I enjoyed getting my background stories and stuff, but there was not even much of that either. So it ended up being just a little bit of a filler book, I guess, in this series, where I didn't really think it was necessary. And so I ended up giving this 2.5 stars and not really enjoying it very much. But I was happy to see by the end of the book that there were some revelations towards the later books that was really interesting. So it was a good setup for the next book. And that's why it gets a 2.5 stars and not a 2 stars. But otherwise, I think it took too much time before I was interested in the story. So yeah, not happy with this one. And next, I also read Wanted and Wired by Vivien Jackson, and this was possibly my least favorite book of the month. I really did not enjoy this one. The audio was terrible. The narrator did not a good job. I really didn't like this narrator. I don't know if it was the accent. I know that some people really enjoy when it's authentic and has a southern accent like that, but to me it just grated on my nerves because I felt like, especially this one, was overdoing it. That could be something that I don't know because I'm not from this area, from the south of the US, so it might just be me, but I felt like she was overdoing it and I really didn't like it. It just annoyed me. This book was about a sort of science fiction type paranormal romance, so it was interesting, that fact, because we don't see a lot of that in the paranormal romance genre. But the main thing that annoyed me was actually that the main characters just kept thinking about sex all the time, and it just seemed a little bit unrealistic, especially in terms of when they were in fighting and they were in, it's just weird that she suddenly thought about having sex with this person in the midst of chaos, and I just didn't follow along with that. So I ended up giving this 2 out of 5 stars, and so I had a really rough patch of a lot of lesser, not so great books, I would say. But the next book that I read was my favorite of the month, so at least there was something positive in this for this month, and that was Amarah by L.L. McNeill. Amarah is the 3rd book in a series. The series is called Wall of Neriah, and it follows, in the first one we meet lots of different characters that are working together. They are from different species, different cultures, and sort of like that. There's some shape changers, there are sky pirates, there are regular humans, imperial guards, and Aurelians who are winged people, and they all work together in order to stop this guy called Asiel, who is having too much power and trying to basically destroy the world and taking over the world with an evil purpose, obviously. So they're trying to stop him, and they are all working together to do this. And after the events of Moroder, when more or less they complete their purpose or their job, they are spread out in the land, and so we're following these different perspectives. And even though this is about Amarah, the sky pirate, like it's named after her, it is not necessarily only about her. She has a big part of this, and there's a lot of focus on her because there's something she has to do that is really dangerous and means that there's a lot expected from her. However, we also follow some others from this group's perspectives where they are in this world at this point. And as I read this one, I definitely could see that Lauren's fondness for dragons, because they are really well developed, and I enjoy the world, and I keep enjoying the story, and I am really interested in seeing where this is gonna go. So this is definitely my favorite book of the month, as I've said, and I gave it 4.5 stars. So I highly recommend you checking out this series if you haven't already. But I really enjoyed it, and I thought that the characters are so well developed, and Amarah is my favorite character. And I really enjoyed reading about her in this one, and there were definitely some changes in some of the other characters that was interesting as well. So I'm looking forward to seeing what will happen in the coming books. It's supposed to be a 6-book long series. So can't wait. And this book came out in July, I think it was the 17th or something. It was released in ebook form, and then the paperback form was released like by the end of July, I think. The next thing I read this month was How to Train Your Dragon by Cressida Cowell. This is the first book in How to Train Your Dragon series, and I read it for the reading rush. This was a really fun book. It follows a Hiccup, who is the son of the leader of this Viking clan thing that trains dragons. And he is expected to find his dragon and being able to train and eventually becoming a leader of a group himself. But Hiccup is a little bit unfortunate. He is not as everyone else. He is a bit of a klutz, and obviously he finds a dragon that is not necessarily one of the vicious ones, but it is toothless. It doesn't have any teeth, and it's basically just looks like one of the regular, very normal dragons that you can get, that are easy to train and all of that. But Hiccup is able to speak Dragonese as one of the only ones in the series, and you're not supposed to be able to speak Dragonese, and you only the way that you train your dragon is to yell at it. That's the main message. But Hiccup doesn't really think that works with Toothless for sure. So he has to try and speak. He has to use his Dragonese skills in order to figure out how to actually make Toothless work with him, because it's not an easy task, I'll tell you. I really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It was a really quick read as well, because you can see it's like really large text, and it has lots of fun doodles on every page, and that made it for a really fun read. And I am definitely going to be reading the next ones. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars and highly recommend it. It is nothing like the movie adaptation. The only similarities is that the main character is called Hiccup, and he finds a dragon named Toothless and has to train it and has to use it in a fighting champion thing. That's the only things that are similar. Otherwise, the plots are completely different, in my opinion. So yeah, but that's okay. I kind of like that it's not the same. So you have 2 different things. And I really enjoy the movie as well. The next thing I finished was Rogue Protocol by Martha Wells. This is the 3rd book in the Murderbot Diaries. The Murderbot Diaries follows Murderbot. Murderbot is an AI. Murderbot is sort of programmed to protect this group of people at the moment. But as Murderbot is mentioning, they used to be a killing machine, basically, and says that they have so many lives on their conscious. Murderbot is in a different place now because they've been reprogrammed, and now Murderbot is basically just trying to catch up to all of the Netflix series. Alright, at this point in time when we are at Rogue Protocol, that's not really completely the case, but I like that there's some fun human-like tendencies in Murderbot, even though Murderbot is definitely not human. You can tell that when you read the books, and I really enjoy them. They're very humorous and funny in their own way. And in the 2nd book we were introduced to Art, who is another AI that I completely adore. Rogue Protocol was definitely fun, and it was fun getting back into it, and it was a great book to use for the non-human character in the reading rush week. and I definitely recommend this series as a whole and gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The next thing that I finished was Paradise Valley by Robyn Carr. This is the next book in the Virgin River series. I think it's book 7, if I'm not mistaken. Paradise Valley is, yeah, I don't know. The Virgin River series follows a bunch of characters. You keep looking back into characters that were introduced previously, so it's like, sort of like a soap opera in book form, and that's fun, but it's too dramatic and too predictable in places and unrealistic in terms of how many are getting pregnant and what is happening all the time. In this one we followed a character who went to war and had a war injury, and so it was a lot about the repercussions of that, how they were dealing with it. And I understand that it's an important topic because a lot of people are suffering from post-traumatic stress after having been at war and seen difficult things, and because of this person also having lost a limb. It definitely makes it a difficult time to adjust to your life again, the regular life again, and you feel like you're a little less because you're missing a limb and stuff. But I just didn't really care for this story very much. There are parts and elements of this series that I really enjoy, and there are some of the characters I really, really like. But I really didn't enjoy this romance very much, the new romance we were focusing on in this one. There was a specific moment where there was a lot of yelling and fighting going on that really angered me, and the people just standing around listening to what was going on instead of trying to go. I know that you should let people try to handle things on their own, but when there are beatings and stuff involved, you should stop them, because that is not okay just looking at it from the outside world, and just, you need to let them solve it themselves. And I'm like, no. That actually really angered me, because there was just that part of this that I really didn't like, and I ended up giving it 3.5 stars, or 3 stars. I'm a little unsure about it, because there are other, as I said, other elements I really enjoy. The next thing that I finished was Courts of Chaos by Roger Zelazny, book 5 in the Amber Chronicles. And while I hated the previous book, really disliked it, this one was so much better. It had a better pacing. It was has a lot more revelations towards the world. It explained a lot of things, and as I said, the previous book had a good setup, and that they really used that setup in this book. And it was the last book from Corwin's perspective, and I ended up giving this one 4 out of 5 stars. But I enjoyed Court of Chaos mostly and gave it 4 out of 5 stars. So I'm definitely eager to see what will happen in the next one. This next one is the Merlin era. The first one has been Corwin's era. So it's very interesting seeing what's going to happen in the next one. And the last and final thing that I finished in July was The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. I have read one Holly Black previously and really disliked it, so I wasn't sure what I was going to be expecting from this one. However, I ended up enjoying it quite a bit. Do I have to say what it's about? Because I feel like it's been... everyone has read it but me. I liked it more than I thought I would. But this one also had a lot of YA tropes that I'm a little sick and tired of. So that dragged it down a lot for me. So there are elements that I really enjoyed and some things that I didn't. I thought it was an overall sort of middle of the road book for me, but a little more than that. So I gave it 3.5 stars and pretty happy with that rating. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. This is all I read over the past month. Let me know in the comments down below what you've been reading over July. Did you read a lot of great books? I felt like this was a bit of a bad month in terms of my ratings and reading in general. So hopefully August will be much better, because I have to read at least 17 books for the Newt. So crosses fingers I can get back to my normal reading jam and read a lot of better books. So far so good in August at the present time we're at. Yeah, but this was all I had for you today. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video very soon. Goodbye!